Hey folks, Nick here from Another BookTube channel. Today, stealing an idea from Andrew from It Came From the Page, who in turn stole this idea from Ollie from Criminali, who in turn stole the idea from Andrew from It Came From the Page. It's a bit of a mess in terms of the lore here, but basically what this is this is my monthly wrap-up for 1 year ago. The idea is to revisit a month's worth of books from the past to just kind of see what I remember about them. Particularly books that I read before I started this YouTube channel. The timing actually works out great because my first video went up in the first week of December of 2022. So, I mean, we're in November 23 now, so a year ago is it's perfect timing, exactly right before I started the channel. Now I am going to have to change things a little bit because I went back on my Goodreads and I didn't read a lot of books last November because there was one book that I got stuck on because it was pretty long. So I didn't want this video to be incredibly short. So I'm going to include both October and November in this kind of throwback Tuesday monthly wrap up. So we'll start with October books that I read in 2022. The first one was The Long Walk by Stephen King, writing as Richard Bachman. And I really was super surprised by this book because I had read, I think I only read one other Bachman book before this. I read The Running Man, and it was fine. Oh, and I read The Regulators, which was a later Bachman book. But because of those books, I got the sense that there was a reason he used the pseudonym. They weren't really up to his standard. But The Long Walk, I think, despite being the first book that he wrote in his life, not his first published book, but I think he was 17 when he wrote it. Despite that, I think this stands amongst some of the best books he's ever written. I really was blown away by how suspenseful and tense this book was. It is set in a dystopian future. Is it dystopian? I don't know. We don't really get enough of the background. It's a very focused book on this one event. But it takes place in a future where every year, I think, there is a long walk in which 100 teenagers, I think all boys, compete to see just who can walk the longest without stopping. And it's a really big major world event. And if and the penalty is death. It's this is one of the earliest battle royale situations, so a Squid Game, where if you stop walking, if you fall, if you get 3 strikes, you are out. And I couldn't believe how he was able to make this such a tense book when all of the action was just walking. But he really was able to milk this premise for everything that it was worth. And I could not put this book down. I was really, really impressed by it. And I don't remember when I did my Stephen King ranking. I don't remember if it was in my top 10, but it probably should have been. I think it was. I don't know. It's been a while since I looked at that. But that was my first book from October. The second one was Carmilla by Sheridan Le Fanu, or J. Sheridan Le Fanu. I forget the full name. This is a vampire book. I don't remember too many of the details about it, other than the selling point online is that it's pre-Dracula but with lesbians, and that's cool. But it was also written in the 1800s, so it's not. It wasn't a smutty or trashy book. It was good. I remember enjoying it, but I don't think you're gonna get exactly what you want out of it, from today's mindset. It's not gonna be nearly as sexually charged as I think some people claim that it is. But it's good, and it certainly has those undertones, which were probably very shocking at the time. But it was just a pretty slight good book by today's standards. Um, but after that, I read Something Wicked This Way Comes by Ray Bradbury. And this was actually in this October, this past October, or last October, 2022, was my second time reading this. And the first time I read it, I was 20 something years old, early 20s, and it didn't really hit for me. I was, I remember feeling very unimpressed or unaffected by it. And reading it again as more of an adult, it really hit a lot harder. This was a very beautiful, bittersweet meditation on aging, coming of age, but also being of age and continuing to get older. And just that the passage of time and how it affects you and it affects people around you. Oh God, it's just gorgeous. This features one of my favorite scenes in a book ever, in which the father of one of the main characters is given an opportunity to literally turn back the clock, like biologically for himself. But he's protecting his child, so he doesn't, and he's literally seeing like the chance being ripped away, page by page, and it's just. I remember reading that, and I was just like devastated by it. Like I was so impressed. I loved it. So really like this second time around. I recommend it if you were like me and you read it when you were younger and you didn't get it. If you're older now, depending on how long ago you read it, give it another shot. Give it another shot. The more you age, and this is one of those I think I'll read like once a decade to see like how it continues to progress for me. So my next read in that month was another reread, and that is Mother Night by Kurt Vonnegut. I have to hold it this way because there is a symbol up there which might get me flagged because of the nature of this book, because of the content of it. But this is, I think, one of Kurt Vonnegut's most underrated books. I think when we talk about him, we talk about Slaughterhouse-Five, we talk about Cat's Cradle, Breakfast of Champions, Sirens of Titan, and Mother Night gets seriously overlooked because it's the one book of his that I can think of that doesn't really have any like sci-fi aspects to it, or much like whimsy. This is a very realistic by Kurt Vonnegut standards book, in which a spy, an American spy, is put on trial for war crimes that he committed in Germany during World War II, because he was a media personality for the Germans at the time, but he was doing so as a spy. But because of what he did and the media that he created, he did technically lead to war crimes being able to occur, and he did propagate that. And the thing is, nobody believes that he was actually a spy. Like, there's no the people that hired him aren't going to bat for him. So it's just his life story of like getting recruited, getting into the war, getting involved in this. And this features one of Kurt Vonnegut's greatest lines that he's ever written. And it's not even in the book, it's in his introduction, where he says, "We are what we pretend to be, so we must be very careful about what we pretend to be." So this is one of my favorite Vonneguts. I absolutely adore that book. I've read it many times. It always leaves an impression on me. All right, after Mother Night, I read Mongrels by Stephen Graham Jones. I don't remember. I think this was maybe my second Stephen Graham Jones book at the time. Maybe. I may have read My Heart is a Chainsaw before this. But this is a story of a traveling family of werewolves. And this is just like the story of them trying to live, make ends meet, encountering other werewolves, encountering normal people who kind of are discovering who they are and them trying to hide it. It's pretty interesting. It's not quite what you expect, but really just interesting, like family dynamics. Stephen Graham Jones has an interesting way of writing that can be very challenging across all of his books, and it's no different here. It doesn't always work for me. This one I remember enjoying, but there's no strong like story through line here. It's just about the characters. So when it's progressing, you're not really getting any like ramping up of action. There's no like real climax in my opinion. It just kind of ends, and it could be a disappointing read for a lot of people who are expecting a more action-packed werewolf story, and it's very much not that. But I like this one. I'm hit and miss on Stephen Graham Jones. That to me was like a slight hit. I guess I was in a werewolf mood because the book I read after that was Cycle of the Werewolf by Stephen King with art by Bernie Wrightson. And that's really the reason I wanted to read this, was to see Bernie Wrightson's artwork, because he's one of my favorite artists. And it was like fun for that reason. It's not much of a book. It's very slight. And the individual chapters, the book is 12 months in which a werewolf is terrorizing this town, and each chapter is a different month, and it's just one person during that month who gets attacked, essentially. And it's super short. There's not a lot of substance to it. Some fun scenes, some really great artwork. Not Stephen King's best, but whatever. And that was it for October books that I had read. So now I'll go into the November books, and there were only 2 books that I finished in November, plus the one that I started, and that was really long. The first book that I had read was another reread. It was The Exorcist by William Peter Blatty. I think you probably should know about this book. I've talked about it on the channel before. And it's also just one of the most famous horror books and movies ever made. And everything you've ever heard about it is accurate. It's great. It holds up today as a scary novel. It's just it is ageless. I really don't think that this book will ever go out of style. So if you've never read The Exorcist, read The Exorcist. It's really awesome. And then I read The Troop by Nick Cutter, and I remember being very disappointed by that book. I don't remember a ton about it, about like specifically why, other than I think my main takeaway from it was that it was gross, but like that was it. I didn't think that the characters were particularly compelling, or anything that they did was surprising. And some of the characters behaved in ways that I felt was just completely unbelievable. And it felt like it was all happening in service of like, just he wanted to tell a gross story about like worms under people's skin, and so like he wrote what he had to do to get that to happen, which sometimes I respect. But I don't think. But I guess I expected something more from this book, given how much I saw so much talked about it on like Instagram and on other booktube channels, and I just thought it was okay. I don't even think it was that gross, really. Like, it had some squirmy bits, some body horror, but I've seen worse, I've read worse. So yeah, unimpressed by The Troop. And then the book that I started in November and then finished right when December started, which ended up being my book of the year last year, was Swan Song by Robert McCammon. This is his end of the world scenario after the nukes have fallen, and groups of people are trying to piece things back together inside of this nuclear winter. It's his The Stand, and to me, it surpasses The Stand. I think it's tight story from beginning to end. It's a long book that doesn't feel very long because it's effortlessly readable, and you want to read it more and more as you keep going. You never get bored by it, or I never got bored by it. And I completely stand by this being my book of the year last year. I think this is a really, really special book. And I highly recommend it, especially if you're a fan of The Stand, because I think you'll see a lot of similarities, but enough differences where it's distinct, and you can appreciate both on their own merits. And I actually enjoy Swan Song a little bit more because I think the ending of Swan Song is stronger than the ending of The Stand. I'll leave it at that. So yeah, that is my my throwback wrap up. I hope you found that interesting. I got to talk about a couple books that I've never mentioned on the channel before, so that was fun. Let me know if you've read any of these books and your thoughts on them in the comments below. Thank you for spending some time with me today, but now it's time to get back to reading.